everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for Will Work for Food. As you know, these programs are educational, they are free, but we do hope that you will support your local food bank or the food bank preferred by our speaker. And today we have a tremendous speaker for you. We've got Marc Freeman. Excuse me, Marc Freeman, born and raised in San Francisco, graduated from UC Berkeley, and spent most of his years doing import business. He once even had a factory in China, but then he worked for USA Global Link and renegotiated over $200 million worth of contracts. And Marc has written a book that I have really, truly, sincerely enjoyed, and I'll recommend it to you now. It is Renegotiating with Integrity, which is also the title of today's presentation. But I will put the link for Marc's book in the chat so that you can check that out on Amazon. It really is an amazing book. Today, Marc is going to be, like I said, talking about how to renegotiate with integrity. It's not business, it's personal, which is something I love to hear, because every time you hear someone say, oh, it's not personal, it's just business. Well, it's personal to somebody, right? So I'm going to let you know that as of today's date, we have received notification of $572,427.74 in donations made from the Will Work for Food programs, which is just amazing. Thank you all so much for your generosity. Really much appreciated. Today, Marc is hoping that you will be able to make a donation to the Fairfield Mobile Pantry food bank, and I'll put the link here in the description for you. But I'm going to let Marc talk to you a little bit about his preferred food bank, and then let him get started with his presentation. This proves to be one of our great programs here on Will Work for Food. So Marc, why don't you tell us a little bit about your food bank, and then I'll just let you carry on. The floor is yours, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. It's a small food bank that people can leave food at the food bank right there outside. There's a shelves, and people go by and leave extra food and different food all the time. And inside they have free food for people who are hungry. And in Southeast Iowa, you wouldn't imagine that there are a lot of hungry people, but believe it or not, there are people who need help. And so they're there and they're doing a great job, and we like to support them for what they do. We have a little small community. We're a town of about 11,000.
Thank you, Marc. And, it does seem, a little contrary to what seems intuitive, that people in the breadbasket of America would be hungry, but hunger is a universal truth for lots of us. So, well, Marc, why don't you tell us how to renegotiate with integrity?
Okay, let me share my deck with you. Did you get it? I got a lot of things on here, and I don't know exactly. Everybody can see the deck?
Yeah, there you go. It looks great.
Okay. So I wrote this book after my working with Global Link, because I realized that I had a skill. And then a friend of mine worked for MyPoints, and he hired me to renegotiate some contracts for them. And then somebody told me to write a book, which was really hysterically funny since I never got better than a C in English. But it took me about 2 years and a very good editor. And I got through the book. And then I use this book mostly as a business card. The book is really just stories about my experience in renegotiating and negotiating, and what is entailed in that process. And I thought through what that process is and talked to a lot of people. Herb Cohn became a friend of mine. Herb Cohn is kind of the father of modern negotiation. And he wrote a book, You Can Negotiate Anything. And then he wrote a book, You Can Negotiate This, and then he wrote a book, You Can Negotiate That. Quite a wonderful fellow. And he read the book, the preview of the book, and he asked to write the foreword. So he wrote the foreword to the book, which I'm very proud of. And many of you may have heard of Herb Cohn. So before I get into the heart of the conversation, I'd like to talk about when we say we're a negotiator, or when we say we're going to negotiate, what are we thinking? If you're a lawyer and you're representing and you're negotiating for somebody, and your client is very angry or very upset, or that they're either being sued or they're suing, and how do you approach that? It's very important. And the integrity part of this conversation, the integrity part of negotiating and renegotiating, is that approach. Can you go in and be nice? Can you go in and find out what's going on without attacking the person? A lot of times people start a negotiation by saying, listen, this is what we want, this is what we're going to get, and we're going to bury you, is the basic attitude. It doesn't go very far anymore. So we're trying to create and teach the approach of, let's find out what their story is, let's find out why they're angry, let's see what's going on, and find a common ground. And we'll go through this process through the whole talk today. By the way, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask questions throughout the thing. So renegotiating is the art of altering, revising, or changing a previously negotiated relationship. So we like to say we work towards what you want and settle for what you need. For those of you who are old enough to know the Rolling Stones song, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you'll find you get what you need. It's a really profound statement. Sometimes people work so hard for what they want, they forget what they need. And that's a critical thing, because you should be satisfied to get what you need. It's always a plus if you can get what you want, but getting what you need and identifying what you need ahead of time is critically important. So this byline, it's not business, it's personal. I thought a lot about this when I put this byline in, because when I negotiate, I realized that even the people that were adversaries, I knew that it was personal to them. So I treated them as if it was personal. And I treated them as if it was personal to me. And so we behave, that your behavior creates your reputation. The effect of personal for those with whom you renegotiate. That's the effect. So we behave as if it's personal, and we react as if it's business. And it's an important distinction to go through, because if we behave as if it's personal, it means that we have some empathy for the person, that we have some type of caring for the person, that we want to see them succeed. We don't want to bury them. We're not trying to hurt them. We're not trying to manipulate them. When they come back, we act businesslike, because the numbers are always business. So it's not business, and it's always personal. I can assure you, it's always personal. Even for a lawyer or a representative of the client, it's personal to them, because they want to solve the issue. So you have to understand the dynamics of the people you're working with. If you don't understand the dynamics of what they're coming through, then you won't know how to deal with them. And we're going to go through some things of how to deal with people who are angry, who don't want to negotiate, don't want to renegotiate, they don't want to move on their position. And we're going to teach you how to move through that. So let's talk about the purpose of this talk. There's a lot of times that people are absolutely afraid to negotiate and renegotiate. They're afraid of conflict. And when we talk through this talk, what we want to do is remove that fear, that there's no issue and no problem with going in and talking to somebody and just having a conversation. and understanding that if they're yelling and screaming, that you can sit back and listen to it and understand that you don't have to be intimidated by it and you don't have to be worried about it, because you can always step back and you can always walk away. That's an important thing. We want to explain to you how to create solutions by simply listening. We want to teach you the importance of being respectful and honest. Honest is a questionable word. When we say honest, we mean we don't want you to ever lie. It doesn't mean that you always tell everything or you let everything out of the bag, that you're completely transparent. But when you do say something, that it's your truth, that it's the truth of the matter of what you think is the truth, that you don't try to manipulate. Because if you're not honest, you get caught with remembering what you said. If you lie, you got to remember what you said when you lied. It doesn't work, and it always comes back to haunt you. So we're going to talk to you about proving the power of humor and the value of being nice. There's a book by Ron Seidler called The Power of Nice. He was the agent for Brooks Robinson and Cal Ripken. And he talks about starting out as a lawyer and having a mentor who he went into a meeting with, and the guy was just not nice to the people. And he walked out and he said, what was the purpose of not being nice? What was the purpose of not being genuine, of being mean or difficult? It sounds simple, but it's really an important effect of just being nice. And we're going to learn how to control any renegotiating through the secret of the orange ball. And this is a key to my whole philosophy. So there's 5 principles of successful renegotiation, and we'll go through them. We'll read them now, and then we'll go further through them. The critical path, the secret of the orange ball, hit the refresh button, transcend the details, and call in the cavalry. And we'll go through every one, but that's the basic 5 principles of a successful renegotiation. The critical path. You have to have a path when you start, when you're thinking about how you're going to negotiate this or renegotiate this project, where you start and where you want to end. So where you want to end is what you need. So if you're in a renegotiation and you need to settle for $10,000, you're asking $25,000, but you know you need to settle for $10,000. It's the minimum you could take. You got it. Anything above that is gravy. So you have to go through that. So you have to figure out what a plausible solution is. What's your comfort zone? And the settlement itself. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. I had a deal. It's in my book where I represented somebody who had a real estate deal. He had a $5 million lease, and the company walked out in the middle of a weekend. And when they got to me, they said, you know, they won't talk to us. They're a bunch of lawyers. They're not nice people. They won't even talk to us. And I found out from the lawyers when I called them that these guys left without saying anything. They are the key tenant in the building, and everybody in the building wanted to know what was wrong with the building, why they left so quickly. It created havoc for these owners, and then they nonchalantly called and said, well, we left, we want to get out of our lease, but you owe us $5 million. Well, we don't want to pay that either. Well, we're not talking to you. And for 6 months, this was going on, and they paid it somewhat. Some months they paid, some months they didn't. And so it was a very difficult situation. I talked to the lawyers, and the lawyers told me what was going on. And I went back to my client and I said, listen, you did a terrible thing. You got to be honest with your client. If your client hasn't behaved well, you got to tell them that they haven't behaved well. It's okay. And you say, you haven't behaved well, they're angry with you with how you did this, and it wasn't the way to do it. You could have called them, you could have negotiated ahead of time, renegotiated ahead of time as to why you need to get out and what the process was. So in the end, you know, they really wanted a apology. It's really what they wanted. The money was important to them, but they really wanted an apology. And so I asked them how many months would it take them to rent the place. And it was not a good time. It was the early 2000s, and it wasn't a good time for real estate, commercial real estate. They said it could take 8 to 10 months. I said, well, 8 months is $1 million. How about we give you $1 million and we call it a day? And they accepted it, but they said, but we want that apology. And I went to the CEO and asked for the apology letter, and he wouldn't write it. So I wrote it for him. And I said, listen, we were wrong. We don't know a lot about real estate, and we apologize the way we did this. But just work through Marc Freeman. Marc Freeman is the greatest guy in the world. You're going to love this guy. He's so easy to work with. I did this whole thing of how great I was. And in the end, he said, well, I'm not saying that. And I said, well, cut that out and just send the rest. And so he sent the rest of it. I had to give him something that he could change on the letter. He sent the letter, we sent the $1 million, and he was done with the deal. And so everybody was thrilled that they got out of the deal, and they got to move on. So let's talk about the critical path. The settlement is not always fair. There's a new thing that I just heard about called the fairness zone. And the fairness zone is a place where you just kind of intuitively know what's fair. But even what's fair is not always fair. We did a mediation the other day with a woman who was blind who fell in a manhole, and the university was negligent because they not only did they leave the manhole open, they didn't put the proper barriers to block anybody from the manhole. And she fell in, and it created great physical and mental anguish. And she just wanted to have an apology, and she wanted money to take care of her son because she knew she wasn't going to live that long. And it ended up that she got some money that took care of her son. She settled it, and it was done. But was it fair? And it's a hard thing. That's why it bothers me when people say win-win, because, oh, this was a win-win. I don't think it was a win-win. She's still suffering. She's still having mental and physical anguish. She's still going through that process of fear and not being able to go out of her house, and lost her job, and is concerned about her son. That's not a win for her. She got some money. She got out of the deal. She'd settled. That's all great. So it's just, be aware that you may settle something that in your mind isn't necessarily fair. And it's okay if both parties agree to it. It's okay. But fair is intuitively, your intuition will get better and better as to what fair is. Finding the right person. When you go to speak to your clients, the other side, you have to make sure you're talking to the decision maker, somebody that will be able to decide, or somebody who has access to the decision maker. You have to go up the ladder to find the right person to speak with. And it doesn't, sometimes they're deceptive. Sometimes you'll be talking to I've spent 2 months with a company, dealing with a company, and in the end, this person wasn't even the right person I was talking to. They couldn't make a decision. They couldn't even get to the person who made the decision. So we had to go back and start all over again. So you want to make sure you're talking to the right person. What do you do when someone keeps saying no? They just say no, 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 no. You got to get creative and use out of the box approaches. So you ask a lot of questions. So here's a little exercise that we're going to do. So I'll pick one of you. Mr. Longwell, can you unmute yourself? Welcome.
I knew I should have taken myself off video.
Yeah, yeah. Welcome. So
Yeah.
Do you play cards ever?
Rarely.
Rarely. So can you tell me how many cards are on a deck of cards?
Oh, is it like 52, something like that?
52. If you're going to split those cards up in sections, how would you split them up?
By suit?
And what are the suits?
Oh, God. Spades, clubs, diamonds, and hearts.
That's right. So would you pick two of those?
Okay.
Just pick two from the four.
Okay.
Tell me the two you pick.
Okay. I picked the King of Hearts.
No, no, not the number, just the suit. What suits?
Oh, hearts and spades.
Okay, so we have hearts and spades. So we can let alone diamonds and clubs. So now pick one.
Okay.
One suit.
Got it.
Which suit?
Hearts.
You could hearts. Okay, now we're left with hearts. Now in the suit of hearts, how many cards are there?
Oh, God. Let's see. 10, 13, is that right?
13. And if you're going to separate those, how would you separate them?
Face cards from number cards.
The face cards and number cards. Okay, so why don't you pick either face cards or number cards?
Why did I do that?
No, no, pick either one.
Oh, okay. Like a specific card.
No, just either pick face cards or number cards.
Let's go with face cards.
Face cards. Okay. So if we take the ace and put it as part of the face cards, we have how many cards?
We've got 5.
Four.
4, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay. King, queen, jack, 10.
Right.
Queen, king, jack, queen, jack, king, queen, king, jack, king, queen, and ace. That's four cards.
Yeah.
So would you pick two of them?
Okay. Got it.
So you can tell me, pick two.
Jack and ace.
Jack and ace. So that leaves the queen and the
Okay.
king,
Mhm.
right? So the king and the queen, pick one.
Of those two,
Yes,
the queen.
queen. Well, now what did I do? I asked you a lot of questions, led you along the line, and I had to do that because the Queen of Hearts was the only card I had here. So
Very
this is
good.
extremely important to know how to ask the right questions to lead you to where you want to go.
Mhm.
And you could set those questions up ahead of time. You know the deal, you could ask questions ahead of time. What was your purpose of doing this? And when you did that, and you can anticipate the answers. So you picked Jack and King, not, and I needed you to be at Ace and Queen, and I said, okay, that's left with Ace and Queen, so we'll use that. So it's a little bit of a manipulation, but what you're trying to do is ask the right questions to get them to a conclusion that you want. And that's how you get them out of always saying no. It's how they move and they start talking and they start talking and they start talking. They may come back again and say, no, I'm not doing that. And then you have to say why. If it's a standstill, it's a standstill. But your goal is to get a settlement. So you have to pursue all the areas. If giving in is not a sign of a weakness. And sometimes you have to know how not to get involved. Sometimes you don't want to get involved in a certain area. You want to leave, there's one subject that's very sensitive. You want to leave that on the side until later. You want to get everything else done and then, because people soften over the course of time. And this is not done in an hour and a day. Sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 months to massage the person and to massage the relationships and massage their bosses to get them to really figure out what they wanted to do. One of the first renegotiations I did to get paid was I renegotiated with Network Solutions. My Points had a contract for 5 terabytes for $5 million. Can you believe that? It's how long, 20 years ago, 5 terabytes cost $5 million. And they were selling the company to United Airlines and couldn't have any lawsuits. A lawsuit would have killed the deal. So they had to get out of this contract because they just didn't need it anymore. And when I first got on the phone with them, there's a woman who represented, she was a Harvard MBA, she was very bright, and she just said, my boss is not going to let you out of this deal, and we talked about other things, and we talked about our families, and we talked about what restaurants she likes to, where she goes and what she does, and where her career was. And I got to be friends with her. And then we talked about the deal and what it is and how do you deal with somebody who just absolutely doesn't want it. And I said, and what if they just stop paying? Then what? You're going to sue them. What makes you think you're going to win in a lawsuit? There's no guarantees when it goes to a lawsuit. It's a sketchy situation. I've seen situations where people won the lawsuit and got less money than they thought that they deserved, or they would have gotten in a renegotiation or in a mediation or any other, or an arbitration. They just got because they didn't present their case that well. So it's important to understand that you want to keep them out of litigation, and you want to keep them in a situation where they can maximize, get the most they can get that will satisfy them, and you're paying the least that you can to satisfy your need. And in that one, we also paid them $1 million, and they let us out of it. And it was a very satisfying case. Just looking at the time. I'm not going to go through all this. There's a checklist here. You can go through this checklist on your own. There's an idea of what to prepare for. I'm not a big preparation guy. As a matter of fact, when I go to my client, they kind of tell me the framework of what's going on, and then I say, don't tell me anymore. I like to go to the person that they're in, the adversary, and find out from them what their side is, and let them really tell me why they're angry, why they're upset, what is it they need, what is it they want. And then I can find out how my client behaved. And then I can come back to my client and hear from them what they think. And then I can see the conflict. Once I know the conflict, then I can figure out how to put them together. There's a friend, the same Ron Seiler, who wrote the book, The Power of Nice. He also wrote a book, Dare to Prepare. It's about preparing for any situation. And it's a good book. It's just that I've had long arguments about, and maybe it's just because I'm more lazy and I'm not a lawyer, that I preparing is adverse to my psychology. But you have to understand these things well before you go in, and the action you need to take in order to pursue this. Let's move on because the time's. This is the key. This is the key to everything I do. Dr. Christopher Hartnett, who I worked for at USA Global Inc., taught me about the orange ball and the principle of the orange ball. The idea of the orange ball is somebody has to be in control of every negotiation, every renegotiation. Somebody always has to be in control. So when you're in the middle of a negotiation, I used to negotiate for him all the time, and he says, who has the orange ball? And if I didn't know who had the orange ball, he'd read me the Riot Act. And once I understood that I had the orange ball, then I could control the process of the renegotiation, the process of going forward. So it's also, you could give up the orange ball and then take it back. You might lose it and how to get it back. So there's a lot of things here. What is winning? You've got to understand what is a win for you. Start from the first slide that I showed you. What is a win? That's very important. Behave properly. Always behave properly. I don't mean that you can't lose your temper or get frustrated once in a while, but even I have a friend of mine who gets angry once in a while, but even in his anger, he has dignity. There's always that movie To Sir with Love when Sidney Poitier lost his temper to the class. And they said, God, even when he lost his temper, he had his dignity. So behave properly. Good cop, bad cop is if you have somebody else you're working with. So if you have in the thing, and one could be tough and one could be easy. I'd never used it too much. And then how do you tell if you have the orange ball? Are you controlling the sequence of the sequence of the process? This last thing, avoid renegotiating or ever negotiating with yourself. So here it is, somebody makes a demand of you of $10,000. You say, I'm going to pay $5,000. And they say, no, it's not enough. Give me another number. And you say, okay, I'll give you $7,000. Why would you give them that number? You wait for them to come back with a number. You don't, otherwise you're just negotiating with yourself. You're not moving them anywhere. You're just moving yourself. You're not moving them back. So that's a key to watch for. You don't want to renegotiate with yourself. Every now and then, you've either lost the orange ball, you've acted impulsively where you shouldn't, and you need to just take a deep breath and listen. The process of getting the orange ball back or making sure you're in control back are three things. Listen, be nice, and use humor. We're going to talk about humor because it's a difficult one. But listening is a learned skill. Listening means not jumping to giving a response, not figuring out what you're saying while they're talking, not interrupting. These are very key, difficult things to do. They're not easy. And I have to tell you, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 6 in listening. You could ask my children. But listening is a difficult process, and it doesn't come naturally. So you have to click the refresh button, sit back, and really think and listen to what the person's saying who's talking. And you don't have to give an immediate response. You can say, I heard you, what you said. Let me think about that and get back to you. You very rarely in a renegotiation or in a negotiation do you need to rush. Very rarely should you feel rushed. Very rarely should you put yourself in a position where you have to give an answer right then. If anybody says, I need an answer right now, you can say, no, you don't. Because I can't give you an answer right now. You're just going to have to be a little patient. I've heard what you said. I understand. I've gotten your demand. Now we're going to think about it. So, because then they say, I'm not moving any further. Don't come back with anything more. I've made my offer. Don't come back with anything more. But then you've got to come back and think about, well, his number is not even close to where we are. How are we going to move him up? He said, this is the last thing. This is the difference in a mediation and a negotiation. In mediation, if you go to your client, says they're offering $10,000, and you know that it's too low, and he said, this is the last offer, they're not doing it, and your client accepts it. And you got to go with it. You're impartial, you have to go with it. But when you're negotiating, you are working for your client. And you can sit and strategize with your client. Now, what do we need to say to move him? Because this is not the last offer. I can assure you it's not the last offer. He has the authority to give more. And what is that more? And how do we get him to it? And what do we ask for to get him to more? So if he's at $10,000 and you're at $25,000, what number is he willing to go? Maybe he's willing to go to $14,000 or $15,000. So you come back down at $17,000 and maybe he'll come up to 15. You come back, that you get closer to him, but you don't give him the number that you think he's at. So those are critical situations. being nice is just powerful. I just can't tell you how powerful being in your whole life, in everything you do, being nice is just the most powerful attribute and emotion that you can have. And it diffuses anger, it diffuses competitiveness, it diffuses everything that people are coming at you if you just can be nice. I've had people screaming and yelling at me, and I start laughing, and I said, I'm really concerned about your health. You're going to have a heart attack here in front of me, and we're not going to be able to make a deal. So how about we settle down and everybody knows how to be nice. The idea is to get it in your psychology and in your consciousness to be nice. Using humor. Humor is tricky. Humor is really, really tricky. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. One is a little bit of a joke, and I was going to tell it earlier. But a man's beating his cow in a field. He's just beating the heck out of this cow. And a saint comes up to him and says, Sir, in the next lifetime, that cow's going to come back as a man, and you're going to come back as a cow, and the cow's going to be beating you. And the man turns to the saint and says, Sir, this is the next lifetime. The idea is you never know when you're going to be the cow or the man. So you have to treat people nicely so you're never the cow. And you're never being put in a situation where you're beating on somebody or somebody's beating, because it always comes back to haunt you. Humor is, if you can diffuse a situation with humor, it's great. Sometimes you can't. I used to sell stuffed toys. I used to sell all the themed stuffed toys for all the Macy's stores. And I gave a talk to all the CEOs of all the Macy's stores. And I sold all of them except for Bloomingdale's because it was a little higher end. And the chairman of Bloomingdale's came up to me, and I'll make this quick because we're going to run out of time here. The chairman of Bloomingdale's said, I want you to sell my store. Why don't you sell my store? And he was a very famous guy in the retail industry. And I said, sir, your company wants to sell Gun. Gun was a very high end plush item. It had a brand. Everybody loved the brand, and they knew the quality. They knew the quality of materials. And that's what represents your store, because you're a very high-end store. I don't care. I want you to do it. They're uninteresting and everything. So I said, the buyer's not going to be happy. And I went to the buyer. She was very unhappy, but she said she would do it. And we designed a Victorian bear with a dress, with a velvet dress, beautifully. I had a seamstress put it up, and this thing was beautiful. And they loved it. We sent in the samples. The samples came in great. When we sent in the 75,000 bears, the velvet was not the same quality. It was just a little bit stiffer. It was a little bit not absolutely right. And the buyer was angry. And she called me up. She said, how could you do this to me? You showed me one thing and you sent me something else. And I said, we have 20 stores that we do these projects with. And we know we're going to make a mistake. So we put everybody's name in a hat. And we pick the name out of the hat. And that's the person we make the mistakes with, so we know where the mistakes are, and you got chosen. Now, that was using humor that failed. It was not appropriate. It was not in the right frame of work. It didn't work. It was terrible. But I said, listen, we'll give you a discount if you want. We'll do whatever you want to do, but let's see how they sold. They sold out in 3 days because the customer didn't know the difference between what she was supposed to get and what she got. So, but they were, and it was still a beautiful, beautiful piece. But if you're going to use humor, be careful. That's all my comment on that is. Here are the 7 fundamentals of renegotiating. And Natalie, will you send this deck to everybody? So you'll get this deck so you can look through it at your leisure. So these are the 7: understanding the issues, looking for opportunities, finding a reason, staying honest, finding and applying an approach, recognizing attachments, and getting the goals right. So recognizing attachments, you have to understand what your client's attached to and what the adversary is attached to. If you don't know what they're really attached to, you can never pry that loose. Bringing in the cavalry. Sometimes you have to, I get hired, I'm the cavalry. I get hired when people are too close to the situation, or they've tried and tried to renegotiate it and they just can't do it anymore. So they come in and bring me in. Usually it's a huge mess by the time I come in. And a lot of times, people who think they're good negotiators have been too harsh and too tough on the situation. It's an interesting thing and knowing these things. But say you're going to, I don't know if you've ever been to a trade show and buying product, and you go in and you want to buy this diamond. It's the diamond show. You want to buy this diamond. They're offering it for $10,000. And you know that diamond's worth $5,000. Now the guy's in the booth, he's the decision maker, and he's with his workers and his wife and his kid. He's trying to teach them the business. He's teaching them how to do it. What do you do? What do you do? How do you negotiate? Because you know that it's worth $5,000 or $6,000. What do you do? So what I do is I ask the fellow, come on out, and can I talk to you privately? And you say, listen, I don't want to talk in front of your family. Listen, that's really worth $5,000. Can we make a deal? He says, well, I think it's worth more than $5,000. So they settle on $7,000. And he goes back and he says, I made a great deal. I made a great deal. And you didn't embarrass him in front of his family and friends. If you said 10,000, no, I want it for 5,000, he's going to say absolutely not, because he's not. What's he teaching to his family and what's he teaching to his kid? That somebody come in and offer half off, and you're going to just fold and say, yeah, never happened. So it's good to be sensitive to the situation. So that's it. We're right at the time where we want to ask questions. Remember, the orange ball is important in the whole process. Everything relates to having control of the orange ball. We're going to open it up to questions.
Mark, thanks so much. If you've got a question, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and chat away to Mark. He's got more examples, more stories that he can share, more information that he can share. But we think it's always a really valuable use of our time to let the attendees have conversation. So please raise a hand or unmute yourself if you'd like to chat with Mark or ask a question or offer your own story even.
Yes, Anne.
Oh, Mark, thank you. Thank you so much for this. You've shared a number of stories. I know you were getting a little concerned about the time and so on. Is there one more story you would have liked to have tucked in there if you felt you had more time that you would share with us?
Oh God, I have to go back and read my book. Yeah, there's a story about, I was in Korea, South Korea, where we made our stuffed toys. We were in the stuffed toy business. We made a stuffed toy called Lamut, which is a very famous, back in the 70s, 80s, that was our stuffed toy. And we were doing, we had bought all these characters for the department stores, and it was about 2 million pieces. And I went to the factory, and we were sitting down there and we were talking with the factory, and we had known this factory very well. They're a very good factory. And I said, I just think your prices are too high. And he said, the owner, no, they're perfect. I said, well, let me ask you a question. What is your profit margin? because factories have a pretty low profit margin. And he said 15%, which was a little bit high. So in those days, it was anywhere from 8 to 10%, maybe 12%, but 15%, this was a very high quality factory. I said, do you mind if we go through every character and we look at every cost and we see what you, and anything over 15%, um, you'll pay me back, and everything under 15%, I'll pay up to 15%. So if it's higher, it goes both ways. And we took us 2 weeks, and we went through every single product, the needles, how many needles it took to sew it, and how many needles broke, and the testing, and the eyes, and the sockets that go into the eyes, and the testing for the eyes that you can't pull them, all the pull tests, every single item. And we went through this for 2 weeks, and in the end, he owed me $285,000, and he freaked out. And he said, I don't know how this happened. Check it again. And I said, check it again. We checked everything, and we couldn't think, and they couldn't think of anything else. And it was $285,000. And he was just freaked out. And I said, now $285,000 may not be a big deal to you, but to me, that's an awfully big deal. So we went back and forth, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you I'll take $185,000 and I'll give you 100 back. And he was satisfied. And this was a kind of a small renegotiation of a contract that we had already set. We had already set the prices, everything was set, but my intuition was that something was amiss. And when I went into it and I looked at it, I was right. But I didn't want to kill the guy, and I didn't want him not to save face in his company. And they were such good people, and they've been doing stuffed toys for us for years, that I felt compelled to give him some money back to make sure that he was satisfied. Now, this wasn't a win-win, because he didn't win because he had to pay more money, and I didn't win because I didn't get all the money that I really deserved. But it was a satisfying resolution to the problem. Does that help? Anybody else?
Yes, we've got a question in the chat that reads, what about those who are not showing good faith? They're just ticking the required mediation box and hauling the other person to court.
Well, you know, the thing is to be transparent. You have to go to well, if it's a mediation, there's a different thing. There's different techniques you use in mediation, and you have to be neutral. And I do mediations, and it's very important to be neutral. So it's very hard to manipulate the situation one way or the other. But if you sit down in a caucus mediation, which is where you have parties separately, you sit down with this fellow and you ask him, are you acting in good faith? It's going to be very difficult to solve this thing if you're not acting in good faith. You could present him with the situation there, you know, and we're not going to move this forward if you're not. Could you tell me where this is? You could. It's the same thing. Going back to asking questions in a when you're renegotiating, it's always caucus because you're always talking to people separately, and you have to be fair. You can be fairly harsh. Say, listen, you're not acting see the difference in my tone. Listen, you're not acting in good faith. I can tell you're not acting in good faith by this, this, and this, and this. If you don't want to act in good faith, we can go to court and you can spend the money, but you don't think that you're going to win. I don't know that I'm going to win, and it's going to be expensive for both of us, and we both hurt. So if you're not going to act in good faith, you got to turn your attitude around. But you listen to him. Why? What are you saying? Why are you saying it? First, you ask him all these questions to get to the point of saying to him he's not acting in good faith. You don't just start out with it. Any other questions?
Mark, we have one more question. We've got time maybe for two more, but the next question in the lineup is, could you tell us more about the orange ball? And you know, the orange ball obviously is an indicator of who has control, who has the power, who's being charged with the conversation. but could you expand a little bit on the orange ball principle, please?
The orange ball is a concept. It's a concept. I mean, you don't. I have an orange ball, but you don't have to have an orange ball in your hand. It's the thought process. Am I in control of this uh, process, of this renegotiation? Do I know where it's going? Can I? It's a chess game. Can I anticipate 5 moves down the road? Can I take the person that I'm renegotiating with down a road to get to the solution that I want? So if you lose control of the orange ball, the indication is that they're dictating the path. They're dictating where we're going. They're dictating and sometimes you want them to do that. Sometimes you want them to have the orange ball. It's the knowledge of knowing that they have the orange ball and then knowing how to get it back. And then you listen and listen, listen, and then you start your questioning. You start listening. You be extra nice. Use a little humor to lighten the load. Sometimes there are low-hanging fruit for humor that will just, if you can get somebody to laugh, boy, you've won when you get somebody to laugh, you own the orange ball immediately. So that's the key to an orange. But also in all of this, understand your own limitations. Understand how close you are to understand if you're the right person to negotiate. Are you the right person to be, or should you bring in somebody else? Do you know a lawyer that is a good negotiator that could be good at this? Or, you don't want a lawyer. You want somebody who's done mediation and done renegotiations and done negotiations, and you want to hire them. You don't always want to be in a situation where you're the prime person representing your client when you know that you're too hot, you think you're a good negotiator, but you negotiate for what you want, and you get very difficult to deal with. It's a lot of self-referral. If you don't have self-referral and know who you are, and some people say, listen, I'm a tough guy. I'm not giving in. I'm going to negotiate this way. I'm going to beat that guy down until he submits. That's a technique. It doesn't work so often, but it's a technique because the adversarial situation tends to spread instead of getting closer together. You're not finding common ground. You're not finding solutions. This guy's just beating me up, so I'm going to beat him up. And then they're in a prize fight. So as a client, you have to understand the technique with which the person that you've hired is using to represent you. And how do you want to be represented? Even if you're angry at the other person, do you really want the person going in and beating him up? You may want a tough guy, that's fine, to get what you want, but the ultimate goal of settling it is where you want to be. And it's hard to see through the clouds of your own emotions what you want. Well, I want to get what I want, but I want to beat the crap out of them in the meantime to get there. It's not a method for solving problems.
So
I
in
hope
your
that
book, right, in your book, Mark, you talk about ego from time to time, and that sometimes it's beneficial for us to let our egos go and to share the orange ball, to pass it around the room, so to speak, and let everybody have their chance at that moment of control, that chance of feeling the power of holding the orange ball. And I think that you're right. That is really important to let everybody have a little piece of that.
Yeah, check your ego at the door. You could check your ego at the door and be humble. Humility is a phenomenal emotion and character. And humility does not mean weak. It means being humble. I'm coming to you because I don't know everything. I'm coming to you because you're in a conflict with my client and I don't know everything. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know why this is a problem with you. I don't know what you think that my client did that you're bringing this case to them. And I want to find out. I want to find out what your issues are. And you hand them over the orange ball and say, okay, tell me. And now they have control of the situation, and they're going to sit there and tell you. Now they may rant and rave, and now it's your turn to just listen. Don't ever stop a person from ranting, because I guarantee that he has X amount of ranting to get out. It may take him 10 minutes, it may take him 20 minutes, it may take him an hour. But whatever it takes, they've got to get that out. And if you stop them, they're going to get it out later. So just sit back and listen. And listen and listen and listen until he's exhausted themselves and they just can't, they have nothing else to say. And they go, okay, I've said everything. And I said, well, that was something, right? You know? So, and they kind of rant themselves out. And this is the same thing. Don't rush it. Don't feel rushed. If it takes an hour, it takes 2 hours, it takes 3 hours. Your job is to listen to them. Get rid of your own ego. Your own ego has nothing to do with this. You just be humble. You just show your humility. And that's part of being nice. And in that, you can gain so much more from the other side than you think.
That was a great answer. Thank you for that, Mark. Lots of thank yous in the comment section as well. We have time for this one last question, and someone has posted in the chat, how about this ethical question for a mediator when they feel an agreement has been reached that is outside of the quote unquote fairness zone? Is there,
So
is there ethical?
you've been to mediation and you've settled and it's not in the fairness zone?
Yeah, is there any ethical quandary for mediators when they feel like the negotiated agreement between the parties is outside of the fairness zone?
I fight with my mediator coaches all the time on this because mediators have to be neutral. They have to be neutral. That's the whole goal, is for them to be neutral. And sometimes the parties settle with each other, and you know that it's not a fair uh, um, solution. But the party who didn't get the fair side of the deal, it may have been more important for them to get out of the deal and resolve it than it was for the money. Maybe they got $50,000 less, but boy, I don't have to deal with these people anymore. That's a pretty big deal. There's emotions in there that take place that you can't always anticipate. So it's important to be able to understand that. As a mediator, I did a mediation the other day, and I'm taking another mediation class from some great people. And there was the same thing with the woman who fell in the manhole. And we went to caucus, and I said to her, well, what will you want? What, you lost your job. How much was that paying you? $14,000 a year. So if you got 10 years with that, if I got 140, she wanted $1.5 million. So it came, she would be satisfied with 140,000. I went back to the other one and I said, hey, what are you willing to give? Because, you know, you guys are so far apart, and they were offering 75,000 and they went up to $200,000. And I said, really? I said, you know, I think you're still far apart. What can you do? He said, well, we can go to $350,000 to $400,000. Now they're negotiating with themselves, right? I got them from 75,000 to 200 to $350,000. Then I went back to the woman and I said, I got you $350,000, but maybe we could push it to 400,000. And they accepted. And she said, no, 350,000 is fine. And we settled it. But I was a little manipulative in there. And my intuition, you know, I wasn't completely neutral, because I was trying to get her more money to take care of her kid. You know, and if they found out, they probably, you know, wouldn't use me again. But I felt I was trying to get to a fair solution, and she was being fair, so it worked. And the truth of the story is that was an actual mediation, and the woman did get $350,000, and they put it into an annuity for her. So I felt I was close, but they chastised me for not being neutral.
We all do the best we can. Try to be nice, try to be humble, and zip over to Amazon.com and check out Marc's book, Renegotiate with Integrity. Marc Freeman, thank you so much for spending this hour for a Will Work for Food. We hope that everyone will support the preferred food bank, which is Fairfield Mobile Pantry, and that is at foodbankiowa.org. foodbankiowa.org, and a donation of any size is greatly appreciated, and not everyone can always give money. Maybe you could donate an hour to your local food bank as a volunteer. So
I just like to say one last thing. This is a great organization. I'm humbled to be representing them here and being involved, and I'd hope to get more involved. This is the kind of solutions that we as citizens have to do and rely on our governments and do this ourselves and feed our own citizens and feed our own friends who get in a position where they just can't get food. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it.
thank you, Marc. Outstanding program. And with that, Will Work for Food for today is concluded. I hope that you'll join us on future Thursdays or find us on YouTube to watch previously recorded programs. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.